FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is scheduled to be arraigned later today in U.S. District Court in Manhattan, and NBC News has learned he is expected to plead not guilty.
The former CEO is facing a series of federal charges, including wire fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors believe he conspired to mislead lenders about the state of his company. Now, Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bond last week.
SBF must be feeling lucky since he's decided to plead not guilty to any of his 8 fraud charges that would land him in prison into the next century. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. And go ahead and find yourself guilty of liking and subscribing.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here with more on all this. Good morning. So what can we expect from Bankman-Fried's legal team today? Clearly not a surprise that he's going to plead not guilty, right?
It's almost a certainty at this kind of initial appearance arraignment. I'm not entirely sure the court could even handle a guilty plea procedurally. So typically what the defendant does is plead not guilty, enter that plea, and then if he wants to change his plea down the line, you just get a change of plea hearing. Everyone rushes in and the defendant can plead guilty. But really, it's just a pro forma thing today. He pleads not guilty. More important, normally you might discuss issues of bail, some other pretrial type issues, and that's about it at the arraignment.
So 2 former FTX associates have actually already pleaded guilty, and they're now cooperating with federal prosecutors in this case. What kind of information would prosecutors be looking to get from them, and how does that impact what's going on here with Bankman-Fried?
This is a huge ruh-roh for Sam Bankman-Fried because these are now cooperating witnesses. In other words, and as a defense attorney, I have a biased view of cooperating witnesses, but these are people who are making a deal with the government to reduce their criminal exposure and in return give the government what it wants. Now, the concern defense attorneys like me have is that there's a tremendous incentive to exaggerate, to put some spin on it, to make them look a little more innocent and give the government what it wants, which is Sam Bankman-Fried on a dinner plate.
Now, Bankman-Fried, prosecutors allege that it was his actions that really led and contributed to the downfall of the company, and that left investors unable to access their funds. So those investors, I mean, do we expect them to try and file a civil suit to maybe try and get anything from Bankman-Fried in civil court?
They already have. There's a host of civil cases filed against SBF and other related defendants, including, officers of the company. So this is a certainty. The reality is, will they be able to claw back any of these assets? Not likely. I mean, just take a look at all the lawsuits. Those are all different plaintiffs trying to feast at one very diminishing piece of the pie. I'm out of metaphors.
I was just going to say, lots of food this morning. Dinner plates and pies.
Small, yeah.
The Bankman-Fried debacle has many wondering if his future actions will have a heavy impact on the crypto world moving forward. We can all agree it doesn't seem to be helping much.
Yahoo Finance's David Hollerith has been following the story. He's with us here in the studio because he is here for this trial. So, Dave, what should we expect from the arraignment hearing is set to happen this afternoon, right?
That's right. So the initial arraignment happened within 24 hours of his extradition. And so today is the formal case where they read him his charges, and after which he will either plead guilty or not guilty. And it's very likely, based on what we've heard from his spokesperson as well as other people and other reports, is that he will likely plead not guilty at this stage. That being said, there's also going to be sort of a conference. It's going to be kind of a schedules in motion, so they'll talk through. But one thing I'll be looking for is body language, posture, how he's acting. And so that's probably going to give us some insight into how he's going to take the case further, what their strategy is going to be. Obviously, he's looking at 8 counts of fraud from the Justice Department. So it's a tall order, and a lot of legal sources say that really it's going to come down to how he wants to, what he's willing to sacrifice in negotiations. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who works in the industry, wants to push it aside as a case of fraud, obviously, fraud. But I think that in general, it doesn't affect the market as much. It's the same thing with the bankruptcy hearings in terms of actual prices, but obviously from a sentiment standpoint and how people are thinking about the asset class in general, it's not a great look.
what does this mean, how this plays out for the direction of Bitcoin? We were talking about last week, Bitcoin has really gone nowhere since the middle of June. I would imagine in large part because of this case.
Yeah, I think there's also this issue with liquidity, or not issue with liquidity. The Bitcoin and Ether are the two largest cryptocurrencies, so they have more liquidity. And so one thing that has been pointed out more recently is that these smaller tokens have no liquidity, so they are a lot more volatile. And so some people are sort of arguing or proposing that Bitcoin is trading, it's fluctuating less outside of these huge sell-offs that we've seen, which are usually these companies that are in trouble because it has so much liquidity. It's typically the easiest thing to buy and sell, if that makes sense.
Is the thinking also, I'm curious here, as we head into the year, as we know that some of the prominent names in crypto were invested with Sam Bankman-Fried and therefore have lost money, have they liquidated their positions in Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example? I mean, I assume we don't know entirely, but you have to wonder if that's already happened or if that's still something that could happen at some point.
Yeah, so the events we saw over the summer were much larger selling events for the major cryptocurrencies. FTX was, you could sort of think of it as a third of that. And so a lot of people are think that potentially the SBF situation is behind us, but obviously there's this constant issue with contagion and whether or not this is affecting other companies like Genesis Lending, which has paused withdrawals, and maybe their parent group TCG. That's the big thing people are watching in terms of a major sell-off.